Welcome, Spartans, to Halo TV Plus, part of Evolved, your home for Halo. I am your host, Oran, and on Halo TV Plus, my guests and I recap Halo's original TV show, Halo the Series, and we discuss its contents and unique canon within the Silver Timeline. This episode is our Halo the Series Season 1 recap. In a moment, I will introduce my two guests, and we will dive into everything that Season 1 offered us. We will talk about what we loved, what we didn't love, do we think that the season was a success, where we think Season 2 is headed, and anything else that we have time for. Joining me on my virtual left is Tom Fishenden.
Don't try it, I have the high ground.
And on my virtual right, I have Aaron Campbell.
Hi, guys.
Thank you guys for joining me. But before we open up the conversation, I just want our listeners to know that Halo TV Plus has published a commentary episode and an analysis episode that accompanied each Halo the Series episode over the last 2.5 months. All 18 of those podcast episodes are live for all of the 9 Halo the Series episodes. So if you haven't listened to them all, you can go check them out on your favorite podcasting service. If you're new to the show, welcome. Halo TV Plus is part of Evolved that hosts a variety of other Halo shows: Podcast Evolved, Mission Debrief, Builds with Blocks, Halo Book Club, and Halo Headlines. Evolved also partners with the podcast HCS Pro Talk, where Josh and Will discuss the latest information within the competitive Halo scene, with an emphasis on community every week. And you can learn about each of those shows on our website, evolvedhalo.com. As Halo TV Plus is a new show, and I ask that you rate it and leave a review. This is our last episode of Season 1, so if you do have any feedback, I am all ears as we start looking forward towards Season 2. I would also like to take a moment to thank all of our patrons for their continued support of Evolved. Your contributions allow us to continue making new content like this show every single week, so thank you guys so much.
You guys are awesome!
If you're not subscribed, our patrons receive a variety of exclusive rewards, such as early episodes, unique swag, access to our podcast soundtrack, and more. And you can head over to patreon.com/HaloEvolved to learn more. All right, let's get to the recap. Again, thank you both for joining me and returning to Halo TV Plus. I had the pleasure of speaking to both of you on 2 different occasions. Tom, you were on the first ever episode, The History of the Halo Series. It was our preseason episode, and you also joined me for episode 5, Reckoning, which was a very explosive episode.
Yes.
Aaron, you joined me for the Trailers and Silver Debriefing preseason episode, and you also sat in for the episode 7, Inheritance episode, where it was all about Quan and sort of her call to action and her journey, and finally something to root for Quan about. So welcome back, guys.
Thank you for having us back.
Yeah.
I'll just start the conversation with Tom, since Aaron, you were the more recent guest on episode 7. Tom, what did you think of the show as a whole, or the season as a whole, and as a non-canon Halo TV show, which is what it was aimed to be? What are your thoughts?
I think there's no surprise here in saying that it was definitely a mixed bag. I think there were a lot of really cool things. Some of the aesthetics, particularly in episode 5 with the UNSC encampment, were really, really cool and felt very grounded in Halo. But I feel like at other times it strayed too far away from what I expected from Halo and what I really wanted. And this is something I'll touch on a little bit later, because I think it ties very closely to whether the show being non-canon actually bothered me or not, which it didn't initially, but as the show sort of progressed, I feel like it really lost the identity of Halo. It feels quite sad saying that in some ways, because I feel like there was still a lot I enjoyed, but it just didn't quite feel like an adaptation, or even an inspired by adaptation of the source material that I've come to know and love so much. So It was a weird one, because as you know, I was very, very optimistic. I tried to be very, very positive about it because I wanted to enjoy it, and there was a lot that I enjoyed. But as a whole, as a non-canon Halo TV show, I'm not quite sure it stuck the landing.
Aaron, what about you?
I've been thinking about this last couple of days. I'm not 100% sure. I think I enjoy the fact it's not canon. I think that freed me of a lot of things that I probably would have hated. But like the question I've been grappling with this last couple of days is it a good TV show if it wasn't Halo and I didn't spend my time going, oh, I know this, or I know that, or I recognize this? So I'm like, this is the question I've been sort of grappling with. And I'm not sure. I think as a first season of a show, it has great potential to get better. At the end of this, I'm not blown away, but I think they could do good things with it. But at the minute, I'm like sort of in the middle. I think if this had have been the canon offering, I would be outraged and appalled. And if this wasn't a Halo show and this was a sci-fi show, I'm not sure I would pay any interest in the second season. So it's the fact it's like a shuffle of Halo stuff. You could probably tell I'm just undecided.
Just kind of reaching for straws.
This is how I keep telling people. It's like the 2009 Star Trek. You're like, okay, it's in its own timeline. It's kind of Star Trek. They have the bits I know. They do their own stuff with it, but some of the potential is kind of wasted. That's sort of what I'm at in the minute, and sort of looking at going like, these were interesting choices, and I'm not entirely sure why they necessarily chose to go some of the ways they did. And that's really what I'd love to get these guys in a room and ask them, is like, what motivated these things? So I think that's where I am at the minute. Like, I'm not appalled, I'm not angry, I'm just like perplexed with some of it. I think that's really my mood at the minute. Like, once we finished it, there were some great things in it. There were some great bits. We'll talk about them as we go along. I do think they did some characters very well. They did some things very strange. And then just other bits, you're like, I don't know is the honest answer. Like, I don't know why we got some things the way we did. But I don't want to start going on too far before we like get into the meat of this.
What I'll say is I think Tom hit the nail on the head with the word mixed bag. It's honestly the word that I keep coming to whenever I think of the show. Like, if I had a scale between 1 to 5, where 1 is like a decision or a event or a scene or whatever it is that I just didn't really care for, and 5 would be something that I absolutely supported, I enjoyed it, I laughed, I cried, I just, grinned from ear to ear. Like, this show like filled the spectrum, and that's not really a good thing, like, because you kind of want to be more on like the 3, 4, and 5 sort of spectrum to kind of keep the the momentum and the engagement and all this kind of stuff. But like, the fact that I can pick really any episode and give you 5 instances of something I didn't like versus I loved, like, that's not a healthy TV show, because you want to be in that seat the entire time on this adventure and relating to these characters, and then at the end of the episode you want to know what's happening next. And as the season kind of progressed, I was more so I kind of found myself wanting to watch the next episode just to kind of see what other Halo bits they would put into it, and like maybe it would just get a little bit better, and instead of like, oh, with the exception of maybe like episode 5 and like 8, where I was like, oh yeah, like I want to know what happens with like this story specifically. And so I feel like that's kind of the biggest hurdle that the Halo show has, because of the decisions that they made, that I think you ask any Halo fan and you'll get a different degree of, oh, I think they changed too much, or you know what, they didn't change that many things that upset me. But like, I think the core question, I guess, that's behind the question I asked is like, did this show succeed as a TV show? And for me, the answer is still kind of meh. Like, would I continue watching if it wasn't Halo? I honestly don't know, because I do think it leaves off in an interesting point, because we haven't found the Halo yet. But again, I know what the Halo is, so I want to see the characters experience and learn what that weapon is and see how it manifests in this Silver timeline. But like, not knowing any of that and it just being some other, I don't know, alien construct in some other sci-fi show, it may not keep me attached. So it sounds like we're all kind of on the same page here, which is this lukewarm satisfaction of, yes, we got some Halo bits, but we also just kind of got some not Halo bits that we have to kind of live with.
Yeah, I'd agree with that fully. I think it's a shame in many ways, because I feel like it's been interesting watching the narrative unfold, and I've seen a lot of people come out and say, oh, do you know what? Forward Unto Dawn actually wasn't that bad in recent weeks. And it's a big shame, because I feel like the Halo community has kind of pushed 343 away from what perhaps this show could have been by being critical of what they've done in the past. And it's meant that it's sort of been in this no-win situation, hasn't it, where they didn't want to risk doing something like Forward Unto Dawn again, because at the time it was received poorly, but they also needed to have some creative freedom, so I think they were in a tough spot with it in terms of fan expectation.
To be fair, I think Nightfall may have poisoned the well a little more than Forward Unto Dawn, but
yes.
There is a little bit of that. I posted a meme to one of our group chats a while ago of the cycle of Halo, and basically the first section is masterpiece, the second is cult classic, the third section is this is awful, and you just take the Halo games in chronological order and keep sliding them one to the left. And we are now at the stage where Halo 4 is a masterpiece, Halo 5 is an underrated cult classic in the Halo franchise, and Halo Infinite's dog shit, and it's the same with the live action stuff. It goes in these cycles. We'll have another live action thing in a few years and people are going to go, do you know Halo the series was actually quite underrated? It was really doing some interesting stuff with this alternate universe. And you're going to be like, what in the name of God's going on? Because that's really, it just like that sort of happens all the time.
I mean, what's amazing, I've seen that meme since like Halo Reach came out, when like there was all these, when everyone was up in arms about armor lock and jetpacks and like all these different things in the multiplayer, and like that meme like first surfaced, and now with Infinite it's still true. And so it's just kind of amazing that the Halo community is like that they're just so predictable that after 12 years of this other franchise it's still true.
Like, I'm like you, I remember playing the Reach beta and people being so angry and so pissed off, and then one day it was like, oh, Reach is the best Halo game ever made, and I'm like, what? I know, and you're going like, I lived through that. I remember people being so upset about it.
Well, people were so upset that it wasn't in Master Chief Collection. They were like, what? Bring Halo Reach! It's like, was it that amazing? Like, it's a fun game, sure.
Yeah, a bit of time and a bit of distance does these things. Like, I do think there are a lot of legitimate questions and criticisms with this TV show. I don't think it's not a fantastic foundation for a second season, but it's not a hopeless write-off. I think they can salvage a lot from it. It's some of the decisions they decided on that will just perplex me for the rest of my days.
So I think that kind of ties into another topic, is just the relation between core canon and Silver Timeline. Even after watching the entire season, I still stand by Kiki and Paramount and Showtime's decision to make it non-canon. I feel like that was still, I think right is kind of relative, but like I still agree that it was not a bad decision and that they wanted to do that. It's just a matter of like some of the details in the Silver Timeline that I kind of have issues with. But the fact that it's not canon still to this day doesn't bother me. But like, Tom, you kind of mentioned a little bit about it on how maybe towards the end of the season it started to kind of be a little unsettling with you. Do you want to kind of talk a little about that, about just the overall show's point of view with the fact that it's not canon, whereas Forward Unto Dawn and Nightfall are these live action pieces that are?
It just really started to grate on me towards the end of the show, I'll be perfectly honest. Because I sat there, and I'll just be blunt. I think that it's no surprise that I'm going to have problems with Chief shagging the Covenant. But the fact that it felt to me like it was great saying it's not canon, but then they used the not canon argument as an excuse to make it not Halo, right? And I think the thing you have to remember is you can do something that's not canon as long as thematically it still feels like the franchise it's meant to represent. And it did a very good job of that initially when it had things like Halsey dealing with the clones and the children and kidnapping them and all of that sort of thing. But I just feel like it really fell off the wheels. Fell off the wheels? No, fell off the wagon is the phrase I want to use. I feel like it just really, it lost momentum for me because I think they tried to run before they walked. And if you think about the evolution of Chief in the games, the reason why him finally discovering his humanity and beginning to develop more of a relationship with Cortana and people like the pilot is because we've seen years of war mellow this man, and we've seen years of losing his brothers in arms, years of planets being glassed, and years of conflict, and it's all he's ever known. And of course that takes a toll on a human being, so that makes this very, very powerful story around humanity and around what happens when humanity actually begins to break through above all of that other sort of noise in the background. And I think where this show perhaps has its biggest issue of all is that it decided to show Chief's humanity too soon. So it didn't feel like it had necessarily earned it. We didn't get to know more of Chief as the machine and more of this person who is going through trauma after trauma after trauma, and we didn't get that build up to that payoff. And I understand their argument that they felt it may not have made him resonate with audiences, but actually, and I know this argument is made a lot, and it may be to the detriment of this conversation if you guys don't agree with it, but I do think The Mandalorian is a really good case for how a character being portrayed in a certain way, with a lot of reliance on physical acting, even with no face, can still convey emotion. And I think just having that kind of impactful moment where you get Chief finally remove his helmet, like you have in The Mandalorian, because it's really significant to the story, would be so much better than the way they handled it. So I think that's the biggest issue, and that's why I have such a problem with it being non-canon, is because non-canon isn't a free pass to make it a completely different thing. And it felt like they decided to go down that route and stray too far from what was established. That just meant that the story really didn't resonate with me as much as it did, as much as it perhaps would have done if it was handled differently. And I think the other thing with making it non-canon is it felt weird that we went non-canon, but then we had a lot of the tropes from the canon, like the Halo 5 inspiration of Spartans on Spartans, and all of that kind of stuff. It felt like it couldn't make its mind up with what it wanted to be, and I think that boils down to a real core problem with just the thematic fundamentals of the show and the understanding of what it is to be a Halo show.
Well, I think that the last point you said there, I feel having the show not being canon, and just like any other type of medium that gets pulled between one source into another source, like you're going to have those discrepancies. So I feel like having them pull from Halo 5 and Chief kind of going rogue, and like all these other tropes that are like in Halo, I feel like you need those even though it's not canon. But I think the main point that you kind of, I think, harped on the most was the fact that it shouldn't be a free pass to just not make it feel like Halo. And too many instances in the show strayed too far thematically that I think are the more unsettling things, you know, with the big elephant in the room being the shagging.
Thank you for using my British word. I appreciate it.
It just sounds so much better than just like sex or laid pipe. But yeah, I think that's kind of the core issue, is that yes, you can change things but it has to be earned, and it can't be the free pass that you kind of mentioned. And there still needs to be a thematic like resonance that keeps it grounded within what Halo is. Even though we are establishing what a silver timeline Halo is, like if you're gonna have it be part of the franchise, even though it's not part of the canon, it still needs to, you know, have those core pillars that it kind of needs to build off of, and some of those pillars were not established or are really, the right fit. I don't know if Aaron, you wanted to chime in, or if we're kind of like said mostly of what you've kind of think.
I think it's largely similar. Like you said, I appreciated that it's not core canon. I appreciate the differentiation because it frees you up from a lot of things. And like back when they were being interviewed about this and they talked about the reasoning for the Silver Timeline, they said, like, they very specifically said, oh, we've changed some minor details, such as possibly, characters, planets of origins, maybe ages, dates, things like that. No, fuckers, you changed a lot more than a few vague details. Like, they pitched it as, oh, we've mixed a few things up, we may have condensed part of the timeline. It's largely the same. I think the real issue is how far they strayed from the main timeline. Like, they, instead of diverging a bit and running roughly parallel, they just, like, shot off 45 degrees to the left and sort of rolled with it. Like, some of it's in the ballpark. I think that's really the thing with it. I do think it was the right shout to not have this be an absolute beat for beat canon universe or whatever. Like, it's one of those things with all adaptations. It depends on what you do with it. Even the most faithful adaptations to a book or another property have to change stuff and do stuff about. Like, you watch the Witcher TV show, it's pretty similar to the books and stuff, but it's not the same. You look at the Witcher games, like, it's the same pieces, but they're shuffled about, they're not the same. Even The Expanse, which is one of my favourite sci-fi shows around, it's similar, but it's not the same. And, things have to be done, characters have to be moved, character roles have to be merged together and stuff like that, but I just think it just pushed a little too far away, and that's really what's got a lot of people's noses out of joint. And I think in some cases rightly so. I think some of it's still a bit much, but it's left us all in this weird sort of middle ground now.
Well, what's a moment in the show, and it could be like a whole episode or it could just be a scene in an episode that you guys felt like really captured what Halo is? And I want to just take off the ending of episode 5.
Oh, I hate you.
I feel like that's definitely like the go-to thing, but what other moment? And Tom, if you need like a moment to like think on this, either I can go first or Aaron, if you have one. But like, yeah, the episode 5 sort of like fight sequence is probably arguably the best moment in the TV show. I prefer it much more than the finale fight scene in episode 9. And I just think like the minute to minute sort of like decisions that Chief makes is all that stuff is good and dandy. And I think we can all kind of agree on that. But I wanna try to mix some positivity in here while we go back to some of the more critiques that we have. So Tom, you said you might have one. Is there another moment in the season as a whole that you felt just like that they just really nailed what Halo is, even if it was a change in the core canon, but just thematically felt very Halo?
Can I be really cheeky and give you 2?
Sure.
Okay, so the first one, 100% the introduction of the Spartans in episode 1, and the way they just drop in, you get these really imposing characters who feel so robotic. That was really awesome because that felt so much like it was matching up to the sort of stigma around the Spartans that the CMA have with all of this propaganda. And I thought it was really cool just seeing them drop in, ignoring the insurrectionists and going straight for the Covenant, assessing just how many people had died at the end of it, and then just walking away. That was so much like the Spartans I think we know in the books, at least during the height of the Covenant War, and I thought that was really awesome. And the other moment is, I believe it's episode 8 or the start of episode 9, which is the glassing sequence. And I thought that was so cool, how you have this ensemble cast in the control room, just stood around, mouths agape, really shocked at the scale of the horror that's unfolding, because that is something that I think is something that you progressively see more and more throughout the Halo games, at least the original Bungie games, ultimately come into its climax in Reach, where you literally see whole cities on fire with New Alexandria. And I thought that the way that was handled was really well. It wasn't a long scene, but it did enough to just really capture the shock and awe that glassing brings with it. And it's something that I really hope we see more of in the future, because it felt really impactful.
I really liked that moment, and my biggest critique of that moment is that it didn't happen in episode 8, and it happened like within episodes 1 or 2. Like, I feel like that should have happened like after the UNSC had some type of victory, so then they can get put back up, get knocked back down again after thinking that they did well. And then now we have this looming Covenant threat that we just kind of don't really have throughout the whole season. But yes, that was a very good nugget to have. I just think we all agree we should have just had it earlier in the season.
Definitely, yeah.
Aaron, do you have one or two season or moments in place, or do you still need a moment?
I think it's not necessarily a canon good moment, but I quite enjoyed the Spartan on Spartan fight. I won't lie. I did like that a lot.
Okay.
It's one of the few times where I felt genuinely tense in that episode. Like, I knew they wouldn't kill Master Chief, but at the same time I watched it and went like, motherfucker's gonna die. Like, I quite enjoyed that. I do think it was just like a good vicious fight scene, and it was rough, and I liked the little contributions from Cortana using the Warthog to like pin Spartans, and I did quite enjoy that. So that would probably, if we can't choose the big battle moment, I think that would probably be like my second.
So, Aaron, you're a Spartan on Spartan man, not a Marquis on Chief man.
I have absolutely no issues with Spartan on Spartan violence. I'm here for it. They can kick ass and take it.
I will say one of my favorite, like, I guess I have a few, but that reminded me of the moment we get with Kai where she's like in the weight training room. I guess that same room that they do the Spartan fight in, and she's with all the Marines and she's like lifting the Warthog and just like showing off and like having all this like personality. Like, I really like that moment of her kind of doing that with the Marines. Just kind of like a little window of fun with among the mayhem. But what I really enjoyed from this show, again, it's to me it felt Halo, even though it is sort of not really. It's Silver Timeline Halo, but I still think that thematically it was translated well on screen. It probably could be better if you really analyzed it, but it's all about Chief and Cortana's like early relationship with each other and how she is there to help. She's programmed to help and do all these amazing things, and Chief is just completely shut off from her. He had a lot that he was kind of thinking with over the course of those early episodes, with discovering who his childhood is, where he came from, and Cortana kind of was like a distraction to his thoughts, and he just kind of wanted to close her out. But like you have, for me anyway, I thought we had a great moment where like we saw the very early stages of that friendship. And I really liked when he's like in his quarters in his like pod or whatever, like cycling through planets, and Cortana's like, I could help if you open up a little bit, and he finally like does. And like that's one of my, I think that was episode 3, and I really enjoyed that moment in that episode. And felt that although it kind of gets a little rocky throughout the season in terms of their relationship, and what I mean by rocky, I think inconsistent might be a better word, to where like I feel like there could have just been better chemistry between them in that sort of build up to then at the very end where Chief like trusts her. Like, I still didn't feel like that was fully deserved at the end. But I think there were some good stepping stones along the way, and like that great moment in episode 6 where he locks Halsey into the chamber and starts like pushing radiation in there to like really test Cortana's limits. And I think that was another great early Cortana Chief moment. And so that was for me really enjoyable to watch throughout the season. And I think what they did with Cortana was great and works for what the show is. So that would kind of be my point, I guess. I think I'm just going to open the floor up now. Is there anything in particular you guys just like really wanted to share, like anything that's been really itching to talk about, whether, good or bad, about the show?
I want to actually just talk about how some of these characters don't have fantastic arcs, but I want to figure out how Master Chief's transformation from robotic Spartan to Master Chief doesn't really work as well as Kai's transformation from robotic Spartan to MVP of the series. Like, they got one so unbelievably, fantastically brilliant, and the other one is a little confusing.
Yeah, the other one's literally a walking corpse now.
Yeah, like, Kate Kennedy has a lot to be praised for. She is absolutely, I think, fantastic in this series, and she does such a good job with that character. I think the two characters that probably like succeed the best is maybe like her and Miranda. Halsey's pretty good, but Halsey's kind of a solid one note the whole way through it. Like, although then again, that is like Catherine Halsey to a T. She doesn't change her motivations. She's out for Halsey, but I feel like Miranda gets a lot of development and comes a long way, and Kai just goes light years further than anyone else. And I don't know how they got it so well once, and yet the other guy is a little bit all over the show. I know, like, it's Master Chief and you have to have like a certain point with it, but I'm perplexed by that one.
Kai and Kate Kennedy, yeah, she's a great addition to the Silver timeline and just Halo as a whole. Her personality and just like rooting for her, and in the last episode when like she's going down at the ship, like I literally had a moment where I was like, I think I said it in our 9 episode, and I was like, I can see them doing it, but it'd be such a waste if they did it. Like, and I was so thankful that they didn't, because of all of the Spartans. Like, even though you can develop Vanek and Riz more, since we didn't really get any development from them this season, like, you could still go so much farther with Kai, and she just has so much potential moving forward. And I can see her being, I don't want to talk too much about season 2 yet, but like I can see her being like an integral part of Chief's development into season 2 if they choose to go down that road.
Oh, we're getting, Aaron, don't you worry, we're getting more Spartan on Spartan action.
You could have made this TV show about Kai and I would have been entirely all right with it. Like, if this show was Kai's journey to becoming like a fully rounded human and a Spartan and coming to terms with her training, and we never saw a Master Chief bar like a flashback or a blurry battle scene, like, I think as an actress and a character, she could have carried this show by herself as like a lead. That's, I think, the difference in the performance. Whereas don't get me wrong, Pablo Scryer's a great actor. I love a lot of the stuff he's in. I just think, and like, I think he does do a good Master Chief. I think he just didn't get as much to like work with. He didn't get a lot of the great like him and Cortana stuff.
I think they were trying to do just so much with Chief that it kind of just ended up diluting itself. Because I really liked the angle of Blessed Ones and like how they handled Reclaimers in the TV show, where it's not just every human innately has this power, it's only very specific people, and having Chief capable to do that, I think, is a very great like call to action and like way to kind of incite questions and decisions for them to like go through and kind of pull this story thread all the way through. But again, like, they did all of that and grappled with what is being a Spartan and where did he come from and who his parents are and Cortana and what he believes in and all these other threads that they tried to attach to that. Whereas if they just simplified it just a little bit more, because Kai's is relatively simple. It's just she took out her pellet and she's just opening up to the world. She doesn't have these flashes that she's, having to toy with. And she just has thoughts, and she goes up to Vanek and is like, so why are the Covenant like fighting us? And Vanek's like, that's a stupid ass question. Like, and she's just like, she literally just has her blinders off and she's just walking aimlessly through the world. And yeah, I think she could have carried the show to a fuller extent. But I just feel like having Chief there has its own benefits, but it ultimately was a detriment because of how far down the rabbit hole I think they were trying to go with Chief.
I think saying about going far down the rabbit hole absolutely nails it, because I think the big issue that you're kind of getting at, Aaron, is underpinned by the fact that they changed him so much. And I think the issue is you can do a series where you say to people, this is going to be very different, these characters are very different, but that doesn't change the fact that people have expectations going in, right? The stronger the legacy of that character is, in this case 20 years, the more harder it's going to be for people to swallow those changes. So you need to do it incrementally. And I think it goes back to that discussion around them trying to do too much all at once, which is it felt like they tried to give him a whole arc in the first season, and they didn't build it out and give us the time to get to know a Chief we were comfortable with, and we felt like we could explore more of a story with. They just tried to sort of cram it all in one go to get him to the point he's at the end of season 1, where actually that probably could have been spread over a couple of seasons.
Yeah, I've tried not to listen to too many other people's opinions on this because I didn't want to come into this episode with their thoughts, but I did listen to a few people point out that we keep hearing everyone say, Master Chief, you've changed, but we don't see where Master Chief came from. The first we see him is this battle in episode 1, and he's already fighting the Covenant. And I think the reason we don't see Chief out there murking insurrectionists because we can't have the poster boy of the Xbox out there shooting humans in the head and executing them in cold blood and assassinating Kai's mother. So we've skipped past that bit. But because of that,
or Kwan's mother.
Or Kwan's, not Kai, sorry. We have Parangoski going this isn't the same Master Chief. You're different now, and you're but we don't know what he was like before, Margaret. We haven't seen him.
Yeah, it's exactly that. It's that lack of context, isn't it? And I think context is key, especially when it's a character you're familiar with. You want to know, okay, in this timeline, what point am I picking up with this character? It's why Captain America's cameo in Endgame, for example, works so well, because okay, this is Steve in 2012, he's very much focused on the mission, he's not going to take any rubbish, so actually trying to tell him what's really going on isn't going to work, because he's not at that point in his character's story yet where he's mellowed enough to actually listen and realise what's going on. It's all about giving the audience the opportunity to understand where that character is at in their story at that time.
Yeah, I think, and that's something that I didn't really think about because I know the 20 years of Halo and the Master Chief and all that. So then when I watch the show and I'm like, okay, yeah, he's been doing this for a while and this is what he's doing. I just accepted that, yes, the I don't know, 15, 20 minutes of screen time that we've had is supposed to speak for the however many years he's been doing this. But even though I'm able to think about that, it's, even as a Halo fan, it's still not rewarding as a TV show to make that jump that quickly, because I think it would have been just as effective to have him make these realizations and then to leave and go find Soren in the rubble and all that. But yeah, maybe if it happened after episode 3 or something, so then we can have two full episodes at least to see what type of Chief he currently is in this timeline. Yeah, those are great points that you guys are throwing out there.
Thank you, Dad.
Is there, I mean, that's not really a note that we could give to kind of Kiki or them, but I have this one question that I think would be interesting to kind of throw out there. But if you were to get one question either in person or through Twitter or whatever, or piece of advice rather, to Kiki or Stephen Kane for season 2 as a learning from season 1, what, I mean, you could say, since we just talked about it, Chief, it would have been nice to see more of present Chief before we started seeing his change, to kind of make his change a little bit more rewarding and impactful. So that could be something you could say, but what's something else that you think, would benefit the show and Kiki and these other showrunners and producers going into season 2, because they're already in pre-production and they already have scripts, but like in this magical world where we could just say something and they would listen. Whoever wants to go first, what's something that you think would help them, not necessarily appease the fans, but just make a better show, since we already feel that the show is already at a mixed bag?
I'd say don't feel like you need to reinvent the wheel. And it sounds crazy saying that, but actually, I think Halo fans are going to show up if you make something that resonates with them. And there's lots of examples out there. Like a really popular example in the community currently, I know, is the We Are ODST trailer, where actually, if you just give someone something that's gritty, that's a bit more like the Halo they know, but it still does its own stuff, they're going to love it. You don't need to put so much pressure on yourselves to do something that's entirely different to still make a show that's going to be awesome.
Well put.
I think my bit of advice would be, don't be afraid to do less. They have so much going on, and they're trying to cover nearly too much ground that they're not giving enough time to anything. Like, we sort of talked about this before on the episode I was on. The Quan story stuff could have been trimmed down. It didn't need to be scattered out as much as it did. It could have been condensed a little more, and I maybe would have taken a little bit of that time to flesh out some other stuff and maybe trim a little bit of fat here and there. I think they're spread a little too far in some places. They're trying to they're like rushing some things and not giving enough time to things. I wouldn't be afraid of like just focusing a little less, tightening in a little bit, and just going, these are some people we need to do some stuff with, because you have characters like Miranda and Soren who get a little bit of time but not enough, and then other things that are all over the show. Like, I'm seeing a little bit more of the Covenant as well, some more behind the scenes stuff with them. I just feel like they're covering a lot of ground and also not at the same time. So like, if I could condense that down, that would probably be my advice.
Yeah, you kind of touched a little bit on what I was going to say, which is to, like, I think at its core, the show, I don't think, does a really good job of grounding the events in this Human Covenant war. And I think that would be kind of my suggestion. And my reasoning for that is that if we had like that glassing scene we talked about earlier in the season, and maybe we had another type of like post engagement to where like you don't have to show a giant battle because of like budget, but if you have the Spartans, throw themselves into an environment that was already, the Covenant already came and like killed everybody there and left and took something or whatever, and we're kind of doing the investigating angle of it all. I think if you grounded like that threat a little bit better, then when we're doing all of the other character smaller things that's kind of contained at the Reach Tower, or when he goes to Eredness and does his other things, like, because like these other, the overarching threat is still like out there and present, I think that would help ground the show to be a little bit more Halo, instead of being all about this character John trying to find out who he was and what he's supposed to do with his life. Because I feel like there were a lot of times where the show kind of just deviates from this threat to focus on these other things, and I feel like, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it completely ignores like what is going on. And I forget who my guest was, but we talked about this in one of the episodes, where it was just like, are the Covenant even around still? Like, all we see is McKee talking with the prophets. So I think that would be my sort of like suggestion. And I think both of you have great ideas and suggestions as well, that if you just kind of focus a little less complicated, you kind of ease up a little bit and try not to reinvent the wheel, it can kind of simplify things to where you can still tell a non-canon story and change some things. But again, I think we're all looking for that, that thematic Halo nugget that just kind of needs to be present throughout.
Like, I think to me, really, as an idea for like this, I think if there had been more build up, more old school Chief before he found the artifact, and it ended on the battle scene of episode 5, like if that cliffhanger of McKee dropping out of the ship and being recovered on the battlefield, like if that was the end of the season and we instead got 3 or 4 episodes before episode 1 that had have just like built the foundation, I think that would have gone a long way. Like the same storyline going forward, whether or not we decide we still want Chief to get his shag on or not is something we have to come to soon.
We just see him shagging someone new every episode.
I mean, there was a moment where I was convinced we were going to get peach cheeks every single episode.
Yeah, I just thought at some stage he was going to have sex with Kai, and I was like, oh, this is going to be like interesting, because I thought they were going to go there for a minute.
I had a moment where I thought Miranda and Kai were going to have some chemistry when they were translating, you know, whatever episode that was, episode 4, I think.
I would be entirely fine if they have a relationship, because they have a better love story so far than any of the rest of them.
Can we just talk about how did Chief not break McKee?
Well, how does Buck not break Veronica? It's entirely possible for a regular human to have sex with a Spartan.
It's good to know. Where you at, Palmer?
You taking notes, Tom?
Do you remember? I can't remember which of the Pierce Brosnan Bond films it is, where the leading enemy lady kills people with their super strong thighs and like crushes a man's head. That's how you end up with Palmer. Just remember that.
I mean, have you guys watched The Boys? We're going real off topic here, but The Boys from Amazon.
I've seen clips from it.
Oh God, yes, I know exactly what you're talking about.
There's a scene that I don't really want to say, but there is some face crushing relating to sexual intercourse that I'll just leave there.
This is going to be the episode that Kiki chooses to listen to.
Yeah, right, exactly. She's going to be like, these people want to, you know, interview me. Let me listen to their recap. And we're just going to be shitting on it and talking about
face crushing,
killing people during sex, during shagging. Is there anything else you guys want to talk about before we start talking about season 2? Anything worth bringing up?
So I do want to say, I think that there is a lot of good Halo stuff in this. All my criticisms aside, I think a lot of the designs when it came to the UNSC especially were spot on. I am in love with the new design for the Marines in this. I think the Spartans look so good, the props look good, the design for like White Tower and the UNSC barracks and everything is incredible. And I think that in the early season, this was fundamentally Halo, because, like I said, a lot of the stories around Dr. Halsey, the kids, their relationship and her trying to control them was really well handled. So I think there is a lot that you can enjoy from it. I just think, yeah, I don't know. I feel like there is a lot of good stuff here, and I know we've been quite negative, but there are actually some gems to pick out amidst everything else that we're perhaps not quite as satisfied with.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of like positives in this. I wouldn't want people to think I hate it all. I'm confused by a lot of stuff, but like you said, set design, I think for the most part fantastic, apart from that set for the final fight scene, which honestly, if you didn't tell me it took place on a mountain, I would have thought it took place in like an early 2000s green screen set for one of the Star Wars movies. Because do you know what it feels like? It feels like an early shooter stage, and I know that's maybe what they were going for, but you're like, oh, we have this detailed map and we fired a skybox that one of the artists drew while he was on the toilet.
I think the Halo 2 map is called Ascension, and I don't remember what it was renamed in Halo 2 Anniversary. I think it was maybe Zenith. It felt like that map Zenith, where it was just this structure floating in the sky with this skybox in the background, and And I the entire season I was saying how my least favorite set was Dr. Halsey's lab. Well, I think Dr. Halsey's lab doesn't look that bad anymore. Like,
But like when they're there and they're having the battle and they go, oh, the elites are coming out of the caves, and I'm like, there's caves on this floating platform, and then suddenly you're like, wow.
they needed an establishing shot. We only got an establishing shot once the elite started running up. If we had an establishing shot before we cut to McKee walking up to the prophets in the very beginning when they introduced this area, that would have solved a little bit of our like mental bearing, but it still would have been an awkward set. But at least we would have had a better idea of like where they actually are.
Yeah, like it's a peculiar one. There is a lot of positive stuff. I think all the Spartan armor looks fantastic. A lot of the other costume stuff, with the exception of I'm not really sure where or whose wardrobe department they robbed for the insurrectionist fashion sense, because it's peculiar. It's a strange one. I'm not really sure what vibe they were going for there, but it looks like
I walked down the street looking like that.
We're gonna have a word after the show, Tom. We'll save that.
It's all later. The rage on the rubble.
Yeah, like it's bizarre. So I don't know where that went from.
If you want to go out for a night of shagging on the rubble, then you know.
You got to put your best gold-plated shoes on.
The characters, I don't think any of the actors were poor choices. Like, I think they got all that spot on. Even though we see very little of Keyes, I can totally see him being the Captain Keyes we need on the bridge of the Pillar of Autumn. Halsey's fantastic. I would like to see Parangoski be a bit more evil, because at the minute, she just seems sometimes like someone slightly confused Granny. Like, she's a great actress. But she spends a lot of the time standing there going like, what's going on? Why are you doing this? You know, she doesn't seem threatening. Like, the Parangoski of the books should be someone that makes you urinate when she looks at you. So I think apart from that, like, a lot of the other stuff, pretty good. So I definitely, there are a lot of pluses in it. Like, there's enough there to build a good second season.
All right. Well, the last thing I'll say about season 1 is, yeah, I agree with you guys. There's a lot of great filmmaking that they did in the development of this show that do feel very Halo. And Tom, you said something interesting where like the early episodes, pretty like I think 1 through 5, you know, really felt more Halo than maybe the latter half, because they were doing that world building and we got to go to these different sets and these environments. Like one of my favorite moments from another favorite moment of mine from episode 3, I think I just really like episode 3, is when Chief after he removes his pellet, he starts walking around Reach, and like he goes to the orchestra sort of thing, and we get to see a little bit of like what Reach life is. And like that moment I felt like really connected to, and just kind of seeing that world building sort of develop of like, this is what we're fighting for, you know, but like I never really got that you know, overarching threat. But yeah, like the set design, I'm always amazed that whenever they have like those behind the scene features, you know, with the exception of Halsey's lab and that, you know, Covenant worshipping mountain. And yeah, the costume design, yeah, the Spartans' armors are really, really interesting, and I like the variants, and like I can't get over Riz's like huge telephone pole that she has on the back of her pack. Like,
can I file one complaint while we talk about things? Reach City on planet Reach. All the names of all the planets and everything else, they gave other cities names, and they went for Reach City on Reach.
It was a bit of a reach, to be fair.
Like, if it's going to be different, just call it New Alexandria. Like, it'd be a cool little Easter egg.
Yeah, like, I kind of get that New Alexandria is a different city, and okay, we don't want it to be the capital of Reach, but like, anything.
Yeah, just call it John McKee Metropolis.
Someone could have come up with something. Couldn't they have just given it a Hungarian name?
That would have been cool, yeah.
Any Hungarian name would have done. And that would have been a nod to the games and stuff.
They could have done something really cool and made it a reference to Halo Reach. So I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but I know that the dead scientist you find in Mission 1, the Winter Contingency, does have a name, and that would have been a really cool reference for a city name.
Anyway, all right, so that's our season 1 sort of recap, what we think of it. Of course, if you want, listeners, a more detailed analysis of each episode, like I mentioned, we have, those episodes available to you. This was kind of just a retrospective look at the season as a whole to see what we liked, what we didn't like, some conversations, and now we're going to talk about where we want the show to go. So, Tom, break out your notebook, because I know you wrote all of these ideas down. You're our resident theory crafter. So, season 1 ends. Chief has saved Silver Team. He retrieves both artifacts. Gets on the Condor. And, of course, while he did all of these feats, he was being controlled by Cortana by his choice, to where seemingly now he's a non-talkative, sleeping, controlled character. And then Kai says, "John, what's up?" And he doesn't say anything, and we cut to black. So where do we go from here, Tom?
Well, where do we go indeed? I think it's going to be interesting, because I almost want them to, and I've been thinking about this a lot, I want them to use all of the experience with the artifacts and everything, and then him getting knocked the hell out to have caused some kind of trauma. So you could almost explain it as he's got a trauma, which means he's got selective mutism. And that would be a really interesting angle to play with the character, because then actually you've done this thing where you have all of the other characters who have established a relationship with a very different chief, particularly Kai, and then he's suddenly mute, and it makes this really interesting dynamic where they have to adapt to the fact that this has happened to John, and he's very different again. Perhaps it takes him a long time to come out of that show again. I think that could be really interesting. A couple of other things I'd really like to see is just more action. I think in general we've got to see more of the Human Covenant more now. I really hope that, to your point, Oran, by showing Reach City, I really hope that we're going to come back to that later and see that same location in ruins. I think the juxtaposition of seeing this bustling city square combined with maybe a chief and some marines fighting in it during the fall of Reach would be really, really cool. From a cinematic standpoint, I think that would be really cool. And the other thing I really want to see is I want to see Miranda get a good story arc. I think there's a lot of tension between her and Halsey, especially now her mother has betrayed her again and has gone on the run. And obviously we've seen in the past that her and Parangosky have got quite a close relationship. So I'd really like to see her story become an adaptation of the Parangosky and Osman relationship going forwards. That's my sort of free thoughts right now.
Okay. Aaron, do you have thoughts of what you want to see in season 2?
I don't want to get to the Halo to the end of it. I know that's going to be controversial because it'll be 2 seasons without a Halo in the Halo TV show, but I don't want to rush it. I think we need the fall of Reach. That's going to happen yet again. Once more, the city must fall. It'll actually be Reach City on Reach Planet, all falling. We'll have the fall of Reach inside the fall of Reach. Reachception, you might say.
You're reaching now, Aaron.
Yes, I think we need that. So that's got to be a thing. I do think we need to figure out what we need to give some resolution to the Kwan storyline.
She goes through the portal and gets killed by a sentinel. Sorted.
I think we need something there. I would like that to wrap into the Rogue Halsey storyline. I would like that to basically be an adaptation of Ghosts of Onyx. We find out that planet is a shield world and Halsey goes off and we wrap Halsey into that storyline, and that makes it more interesting. I don't think we also need Rogue Halsey as another on her own storyline, because I think we also need to emphasize the Covenant War I want to see the war come to the rubble. I want to see Soren evacuating his family, fleeing to Reach for the fall of Reach. I want that to be a thing. I want those storylines tied together. I would like to see Silver Team and Corpse John fight alongside Soren.
That would be a great way to incorporate Soren into the Silver Team, is to just have his family get killed and the rubble basically destroyed, and he's fleeing and then eventually links up with them. Because I would love to see more of Soren, and we didn't really talk about the Quan storyline because there's not really much more to say about it, but I think they really could have rewritten that story better to just make it more engaging and still end where they ended it, to where, like you say, Aaron, and it gets addressed in season 2, and we learn about what that monitor is and why it's there, because the monitor is there to protect something.
Boiling it down a little bit into a couple of storylines, I think would be a good way to do it. Just, we eventually need to narrow it down to the point where we have Chief, hopefully as Chief, and Keyes going off to do their Halo thing, because they have to get to a Halo, and they can't take the gang with them. Like, that's important. Really changes what Combat Evolved is if he suddenly appears on the Halo with Silver Team and Quan and Halsey and everyone else. Like, if he brings the whole crew with him, it's a weird one. So
I wouldn't be opposed to that, because again, they're not going to recreate CE. Like, all because they get to the ring, that doesn't mean that the next chapter will be recreating. I think it'd be interesting where it almost becomes like a Glasslands type of a thing, where, or is it Grasslands?
No, it is Glasslands, you're right, yeah.
And we have, I mean, in that story, we have who? We have Lucy, we have Tom, we have Fred, Halsey, Mendez, I think. Like, we have like a band of misfits, walking through this shield world. So why not just, take from that, and you have Silver Team and Keyes and a few other characters now on the Halo, and now we explore Halo in the realm of the TV show, and it's different from the campaign, but you still have the pillars of finding the control room and discovering the flood and stopping or starting an activation to some degree. Like, you have those 3 pieces, you have the core or the essence of what CE was, so then you can do your own story around it.
I'd like it to go the opposite way and go dark as fuck. I would like Keyes and Chief to go off to the Halo. I would like 2 episodes of absolute unadulterated horror TV show where Chief is doing the library, Keyes is being murdered, and here's how we tie it back into the main universe. Instead of John and Cortana escaping on a ship off the Halo, they portal out to Quan. And that's actually what it is. It's an exit portal, and that's how he gets back into the universe. But I want Chief to fall out of a portal like the Doom Marine, covered in the blood of the Flood, going, what in the motherfucking Christ, as we've watched a live-action Captain Keyes get eaten alive and have his face caved in. I want this to go dark.
Aaron, you've got problems, man.
Think about how, sort of light this show is on a lot of stuff sometimes. Like, just the true, absolute horror of the Flood. And it's a really easy thing to do. You need nice dark sets. You don't have to have all of the Flood visible all of the time. You don't have them, the budget doesn't have to be astronomical, but a really good mix of first person and third person scenes while Tim Didabo patronizes you from the rafters. Think how good that would be. And then just Chief pops back out in the far end and everyone's like, oh God, what's wrong with Master Chief? Why is he covered in so much blood? Whose head is that attached to his fist? Go with that stuff. And then, meanwhile, you can do the Fall of Reach and have Silver Team be busy.
That'd be a good way to get Silver Team off of the ring if they're dealing with the Fall of Reach. So that was more of an epiphany. Okay. But what I will say real quick before you do your train of thought is that in terms of horror, for the 2 of you and our listeners, if you have not listened to the audiobook for the Mona Lisa short story from Halo Evolutions, you need to do yourself a favor and find a way to download it, whether legally or illegally, and give yourself a listen to it, because it is, in my opinion, the best audio book of a Halo piece of literature. And the actor, or the voice actor that delivers all of the lines, reads it with such intensity and emotion that you feel the horror of the Flood. And there is a motion comic of it that does a little bit of that justice. I don't know if it's the same person narrating. I don't think it is, but it's only about an hour and a half. And so, whether it's 2 car rides to work or something, like, it is an experience for Halo fans, especially to like see this, or rather listen and imagine the horrors of the Flood. So anyway, Tom, go ahead.
I will just say, for any potential sponsors who are listening to our show, just to slightly correct Oran there, we only encourage people to listen legally to the Mona Lisa.
No, I'll definitely tell people that they definitely probably won't find it on YouTube, just saying. Probably isn't there. And as a person that didn't have access to the audiobooks for a long time because some of those weren't available here, that's definitely not how I listen to it.
Future Aaron, please cut that segment. What I was going to say, you have absolutely given me an epiphany, because this series is adapting from other source material, right? And I have a feeling the way we're going to go is the portal's going to be the big MacGuffin, so they're all going to end up on Madrigal trying to defend the portal after the fall of Reach. They're going to go through the portal to get to the ring. The portal's going to get destroyed, so they're stranded, a la Halo Wars 2. And they're going to realise once they're already through the portal that the Covenant have already found the ring and have way more forces there than they do. So we're going to go into a Halo Infinite style guerrilla combat scenario where the cast who make it through to the ring are forced to try and survive on the ring whilst also exploring it and working out the secrets that lie within. And then eventually we're going to get to the situation where the Covenant and the UNSC have an uneasy truce, because they need to fight together to push back the Flood.
I like it.
If there's a spare seat in the writer's room, pull it out, because I'm coming to sit down.
I think that would be that is a very easy, adaptable way to keep the TV show relevant, pull from what is currently going on in the Halo universe. Yeah, I like that. I like it a lot.
I'll take my paycheck in the post.
You'll have to talk to Ian about that one. I'm sure he'll take care of it.
Ian, if you're listening right now, I'm talking to you directly. And if you are a listener who happens to be called Ian, you're awesome.
Yes, thank you, listener Ian. Do we any final thoughts before we wrap up this episode? Whether about season 1, season 2, I'll go first. I enjoyed watching the show. I enjoyed every week recording with a different guest and talking about the episodes while they happened and doing like an analysis. I am all on board for season 2 and hope that the showrunners and producers and writers listen a little bit to the Halo fans, because I know there's a broad spectrum of us out there, so there's some of us you may not want to listen to, and frankly you probably shouldn't listen to some of those Halo fans. But yeah, we all want this show to be as good as it can be. We love this franchise. This show does a lot of great things. I would still recommend it to anyone who has any sort of interest in Halo, and just give them the little asterisk of like, well, they changed some things that are, not great, but like look at episode 5 battle sequence and, just enjoy that at the very least.
Yeah, I think I'd echo that and say, at the end of the day, don't be overly critical on this season, because it is a season 1. And it's a learning experience, right? And if people are positive with their feedback, I'm sure that will shape what they're doing in the writer's room, and then we can go from there. And Oran, I also want to shout out you quickly, because I think you should be really proud of how this series has come together. It's the quickest we've ever pulled together a new series on Evolved, as far as I'm aware, and you've absolutely knocked it out the park, and I think these have been really fun to listen to. So thank you for putting together Halo TV Plus and bringing that television experience even more full circle for so many people as well.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. It's truly been a lot of fun. I think I had more fun than I thought I would because I've been doing the podcast for so long, and this is just a really new spin. I mean, I work in the TV space already, so like I have that connection to it as well. I'm glad that you've been really enjoying yourself, and I've gotten a few messages on either Apple Podcasts or on Twitter of other fans, enjoying it. So I'm glad that people are having fun. That's what it is at the end of the day. Let's talk about it and try to enjoy ourselves. So, all right. Well, I think we'll wrap it up here. Listeners, if you want more Halo the Series goodness that you may have missed over the past 2.5 months, Paramount Plus produced a Halo after show segment called Halo the Series Declassified that was released with each TV episode. The host, Sydney Goodman, she interviews different members of the cast and shares behind-the-scenes footage from the crew that made the Halo series possible, and I highly recommend you check those out if you haven't. They give good insight on the episode they were released with, and just have a good sort of conversation about, like I said, the behind-the-scenes stuff. I really enjoyed watching those every week. Also, on HaloWaypoint.com, Alex Wakeford released a Silver debriefing blog post for each Halo the Series episode as well. This blog source is a source to recap the story of each episode in detail, serve as a hub for additional show-related content, and provide some more detailed insight into certain other things. Admittedly, I haven't read any of the blogs, but that's kind of because I've been doing some other things over the past 2.5 months. But I fully intend to go back into them over the summer and just kind of give a read and see what information is in there. So if you haven't checked them out and you want to do some extra reading, you can go check those out. Maybe we'll do a show about those and like a kind of post-mortem type of a thing. I don't know. That is additional content out there, as well as just a general, news search of the casts and Kiki and Steven making their rounds on the marketing tour or the
press tour.
That's it. So I know like IGN just had a recent interview with the cast now that season 1 is over. I think Ryan McCaffrey hosted that. I haven't listened to it, but yeah, there's a bunch of resources out there for you guys to check out in addition to our show. So thank you guys so much for listening. Tom and Aaron, thank you guys so much for joining. It has been a pleasure. Halo the Series is exclusively on Paramount Plus right now. In select regions, UK and Ireland, you guys get Paramount Plus in June 2020.
I can finally watch it and stop pretending.
June 22nd, 2022. So I made a joke here that thank you guys for traveling to the United States each week to watch the show legally and support Halo TV Plus. So thank you guys for that.
I want business class next time.
Yeah. You can finally go back to work now that the season's over. Like I mentioned at the top of the show, you can find every episode to all of the shows that Evolved produces on our website, evolvedhalo.com. It also features links to our Discord server, Patreon page, Xbox Live Club, and other contact information so you can connect with us. Once again, another special shout out to all of our patrons for their support of Evolved and making all of our shows possible. Thank you guys again so much. You can, if you're not a patron, you can head over to patreon.com/HaloEvolved to learn more. And finally, if you want to leave us an email or a voicemail about anything related to the Halo TV series for a future episode that we do, you can email us at podcastevolved@gmail.com, or you can give us a call at 205-EVOLVED, which is 205-386-5833. And with that, I have been your host, Oran. Thank you for joining me for Season 1 of Halo TV Plus. We are going to take a break for a few months, but we will be back for Season 2. Maybe we'll do some other things while we wait for Season 2. Not sure yet, but yes, thank you guys so much. Like Tom said, it's been a real privilege for me to put this show on, so thank you guys for joining me, and until that time, evolved.
Evolved.